In Skin of Deception, Part 2, David Grant, a young teacher seeking peace in the quiet Jamaican village of Mount Olivet, finds himself drawn to the mysterious Marisa, despite warnings from Elder Simeon. What begins as simple companionship soon reveals unsettling rituals, eerie chants, and a terrifying moment when David witnesses Marissa's spirit leave her body and return in a violent convulsion. As whispers of witchcraft spread through the village, David struggles between desire and discernment, realizing too late that beauty can be a trap and that he has stepped into a darkness far older than the hills themselves. Part 2 sets the stage for a major confrontation, hinting that the truth, no matter how deeply it has been buried, is about to break through. And not everyone will be ready for what it reveals. Welcome to Part 3 of Skin of Deception. The shadows grow heavier, and the truth is darker than anyone imagined. David now stands at a crossroads. Will he overcome temptation and wield the sacred items entrusted to him by Elder Simeon? Or will Marissa's grip pull him deeper into her web of deception? Every choice carries weight, and the line between survival and destruction has never been thinner. Will David remain alive? Or will this be the night his story ends? Days passed, and David told himself he needed more time. Time to understand Marissa's movements. Time to observe her patterns. Time to know when she left her body. So he continued visiting her. He smiled when she smiled. He laughed when she laughed. He pretended nothing was wrong, but the truth grew harder to hide. The illnesses in the village worsened. Churches that once overflowed with worship now sat half empty. Not because people didn't want to worship, but because many could not get out of bed. Those who came sat slumped, as if something drained their strength. The schoolyard echoed with absence. Desks vacant, children coughing, families grieving. Mount Olivet was sinking, and David knew exactly where the rot began. Every visit with Marisa felt like walking deeper into a fire he had no shield for. But as David sat and pondered, he made up his mind that tonight would be the last night he would visit, and everything would change. The night was warm and silent, yet when David stepped up to Marissa's gate, a cold breeze brushed past him, sharp enough to cut through the skin. He stopped. The air felt wrong, too still, too expectant. Before he could knock, Marisa opened the door, her smile soft, too soft. "David," she breathed, voice smooth as molasses. "I'm glad you came." The air inside the house was thick and stale. There was warmth of welcome. The air was filled with incense, not church incense or holiness. This was something bitter, earthy, and ancient. David tried to steady his breath. He was a teacher, not a child. He didn't fear shadows, but tonight, he felt watched. Marisa moved gracefully. It almost seemed as if she were floating. She placed a cup before him. "Drink," she whispered. "It will help you relax." He hesitated, but he drank. The tea was warm and sweet, too sweet. Minutes later, his eyelids sagged. His heartbeat thudded like distant thunder. His limbs slowed as though sinking into sand. Marisa sat across from him, her eyes glowing faintly in the candlelight. They were unreadable. "You've been troubled," she murmured. "People whisper. People fear. But you trust me, don't you, David?" He tried to reply, but his voice dissolved in the air. The room began to spin. Then he heard it. A low, rhythmic sound from the back room. It sounded like waves crashing against rock. David frowned and forced a whisper. "Marisa, who else is here?" She didn't answer. Instead, she touched his cheek gently. "Rest," she whispered. "Tonight, let me take care of everything." But the chant grew louder. David forced himself up, stumbling, heavy, fighting the pull of sleep. He followed the sound. The door creaked beneath his hand. Inside, shadows moved, figures swayed. Symbols covered the floor, drawn with something too dark to be chalk. A bowl sat in the center, filled with water that churned and darkened with something swirling inside. And beside it, a small goat, trembling, struggling for breath. David's heart lurched. The chanting stopped. Behind him, Marissa's voice shifted to something deep and cold. You weren't supposed to see that. David turned slowly. Her smile was gone. Her eyes were no longer warm or mysterious. They were ancient, powerful, and terrifying. Mount Olivet is sick, she whispered, and sickness always needs a source. His breath caught. A long silence sprawled between them. Then she continued softly. Balance must be restored, and sometimes restoration requires sacrifice. David stumbled backward, reaching for the door, but Marisa stepped forward, calm, composed, her voice no longer soothing. You can't leave yet, David. It wasn't a request, it was a trap closing. David's pulse hammered. His legs trembled beneath him, but something inside him forced him to move. He stumbled backward, hands blindly searching for the doorknob. In a sudden burst of desperation, he pushed past her, shoulder colliding with her arm, and sprinted into the hallway. Candles flickered violently as he passed. Marisa did not scream. She did not chase. She only laughed, low and bone-chilling. It was a laugh that followed him like footsteps he could not outrun. David slammed through the front door and into the night. David did not remember grabbing his shoes. He did not remember closing the gate. He only remembered the sound of his pulse, a thunder pounding in his skull, and the feeling of Marissa's eyes burning into his back as he fled into the darkness. The air outside felt no safer. The wind had died. The crickets stopped singing. Even the trees seemed still, watching. David's breath tore from his lungs as he stumbled down the path. He needed to get away. He needed Elder Simeon. He needed the pouch and the oil. Then he froze. A tall, motionless figure stood at the far end of the lane, blocking the road. David blinked, his eyes adjusting. The shape did not move or speak. It just watched him. He took a step backward. His spirit shuddered. This was not Marisa, not her physical form. The goat's cries echoed in his memory. The symbols on the floor, her voice in the shadows. Balance must be restored. David turned sharply and sprinted in the opposite direction. He ran through thick bushes, branches clawing his arms, thorns tearing his shirt. Every sound felt amplified. Every shadow felt alive. The village lane that was gentle during the day had become a tunnel of shadows. Trees leaned inward, their branches gnashing against one another like teeth. The moon hid itself behind swollen clouds, and every step dragged as though the night itself wanted to hold him. His breath was ragged. His heart beat a desperate rhythm against his ribs. But one thought pushed him forward. Simeon, I must get to Elder Simeon. Simeon's house appeared through the trees, a faint lantern glowing in the window, like a beacon trembling in the darkness. David's knees buckled. Then he felt it, a presence behind him, close, too close, breathing down his neck. David spun around. Nothing. Just darkness, but he could feel it, a weight in the night. Marisa had not followed him, but something else had. Something she called, something tied to the ritual. David stumbled on the final steps toward Simeon's house and pounded the wooden door with trembling fists. Elder! Elder Simeon, open! Please, open! Inside, footsteps moved. The latch clicked, and as the door swung wide, David collapsed into the elder's arms. His voice was barely a whisper. She's starting something, and I think it's already here. Simeon stepped back in reverence and lifted his hand slowly. Words rolled out of his mouth, not gentle like Sunday prayer, but the language of saints who warred in secret. David lifted his head. He had felt fear before, foolish fear, childish fear. But this fear was different. This was the kind of fear that sat on your chest and whispered that you would not see the sunrise. Simeon turned, eyes narrowed. He was not talking to David. He was talking to the thing outside. You bring sickness to our children. You disturb our fields. You drain the life from this community. But you will not take this one. The darkness shifted. Not a breeze, not a shadow, but there was a presence. Dogs howled in the distance. One, then two, then none. The night became a drum. Something hovered beyond the fence, not human, not animal, but something hungry. David clung to the porch rail, unable to breathe. Simeon did not break. He prayed louder. He prayed boldly like a man who knew that angels listened. For every whisper of fear the night pressed upon them, the elder answered with fire, word for word, scripture for strike, promise for every demon. The thing beyond the fence hissed like rain on iron and retreated. The elder lowered his hands, and the silence afterward felt heavier than any sound. Elder Simeon looked at David, eyes old, tired, but burning with purpose, and said, "This fight is not flesh and blood." And somewhere beyond the trees, a woman laughed softly. Not in fear, but in hunger. David did not remember when sleep claimed him. Only the trembling of his body and the echo of Simeon's prayers were hovering in the small wooden room. The night was long and restless, marked by the silence that pressed against the ribs, making breathing feel like a confession. Elder Simeon sat near the doorway through most of the hours, Bible open and his lips moving quietly. Before dawn broke, Simeon spoke again to David, not like a preacher, but like a man who had seen war. He spoke of Marisa, who came to Mount Olivet many years earlier. Young, beautiful, alone. People welcomed her then too, and soon after, the first sickness came. The sicknesses at that time were not fatal. They just lingered. Then animals began dying, and families left the village quietly, ashamed to admit they were afraid of one woman. Only the elders remembered. Only the faithful took it seriously, and only one thing we found out could sever her power: holy oil, salt, and pepper on the body she leaves behind. David listened. He heard every word. His mind accepted the logic, yet his heart rejected the conclusion. Marisa was beautiful, gentle, human. Morning did not arrive gently. It crawled over Mount Olivet like a storm that avoided the sky. No laughter came from the lane, only the shuffle of weary feet and the heavy breathing of a village half alive. The roosters called out before the sun rose, and David woke with sweat on his neck and a tremor in his hands. For a moment he hoped it had been a bad dream, but Simeon sat on the veranda, still praying, as if the night had not ended. David stepped outside, the cool air biting his skin. Simeon turned, slowly. "You saw truth last night. Do not pretend it was a dream." David swallowed. His mouth was dry. He tried to answer, but all he found were questions. He stared at the hills, at the dew sitting on the bush, at the village waking in half-light. And he thought about the bottle of oil, the salt, and the small cloth pouch resting in his house. They felt like a weapon, and David was not a warrior. He was a teacher who taught multiplication and maps, as well as how to spell words the children already knew. He came here for peace, not to hunt demons in human flesh. So he made the easiest decision a frightened man can make. He left. Simeon watched him walk down the lane. He did not call out, only whispered, "Faith without obedience has never saved a village." And behind David, Elder Simeon prayed for mercy, knowing what silence would cost. Word of the night had traveled without a messenger. People stepped outside their houses as though waking from the same nightmare. A mother stood at her doorway, holding a child whose skin burned with fever. A farmer stared at a field stripped bare, leaves gone as if something had devoured them in silence. The village, which once hummed with prayer and market chatter, now whispered only one thing: curse. The sickness grew worse each day. Teachers noticed empty desks. David counted 5 absences on Monday, 9 on Tuesday. By Thursday, half the class was gone. The elders gathered after service, faces grim. No one dared say Marisa's name aloud, yet every glance leaned toward the road leading to her house. The men from the rum shop swore they saw something in the hills at night, a long, dark shape gliding above the trees, a wind that howled without moving the leaves, a shadow that wasn't cast by the moon. Nobody wanted to be the first to speak, but everyone knew. Witchcraft had returned to Mount Olivet. The church was the first to feel the fracture. Where there had once been songs, there was now silence. Where hands had clapped and tambourines rang, there were only folded arms and bowed heads. Some members blamed the new teacher, others whispered of Marisa, but none of them prayed loud enough to challenge the darkness. Elder Simeon watched from the back pew, jaw clenched. He had seen this before, not with eyes but with his spirit. Mount Olivet wasn't simply sick, it was feeding something. In hushed corners of the lane, villagers traded accusations like weapons. She cursed my garden. She took my child's soul. She is not human. But when the sun set, nobody dared investigate. Every door in the village was locked early, every light turned off, and every prayer whispered through trembling lips. The village was no longer a community. It was prey. And Marisa? Marisa walked through the market as if nothing had changed. She smiled. She greeted. She touched children's cheeks and complimented mothers on their hair. Her beauty was still gentle, her voice still sweet, but now the sweetness lingered like poison in tea. People forced themselves to look away, not because they disbelieved the rumors, but because believing them meant acknowledging they were powerless. David kept his distance. He taught by day and returned to Simeon by evening. He watched. He avoided her gaze. But the memory of what he had seen followed him into every classroom and with every heartbeat. Marisa never asked why he had left her gate that night. She simply greeted him with the same soft smile. A smile that said, "You can run, but you will return." The village trembled beneath her shadow. The young teacher trembled beneath his secret, and somewhere in the hills, the darkness laughed. 3 days passed in Mount Olivet, but it felt like 30. David barely slept. Every blink brought back the image of Marissa's body on the floor. Breathing without breath, alive without life. He tried to function. He taught classes. He greeted neighbors. He went to church. But the eyes that once welcomed him now slid away in silence. Murmurs trailed him like shadows. He is taken up with this Obia woman. No wonder the sickness taking over the children. Teacher turned fool. The village no longer trusted him. Parents stopped sending their children to school. Pews that were once full on Sundays were half empty. And the boy he mentored, the quiet one with a bright mind, was bedridden, sweating and delirious. Something in David hardened. He could not run, he could not hide, he could not pray this away. An end had to come. David walked the main road slowly that morning. The dust beneath his feet seemed heavier, as though the earth itself was tired. Old Miss Denise turned her face when he passed. A group of boys stopped talking until he moved out of earshot. He understood why. He had been seen entering Marissa's yard at night, so in their eyes, he was no longer a teacher. He was tainted. But for David, judgment from the village no longer mattered. He had seen the truth, but he needed information. He needed time, and most of all, he needed Marisa to think she still had him wrapped around her finger. So he rehearsed the lie. Smile and be calm. Act as though the terror was nothing but a dream. He clutched the pouch Elder Simeon had given him. Oil, salt, pepper, and something he still didn't understand. He didn't know how to use it. But if he rushed, if he exposed himself too soon, Marisa wouldn't just kill him. She would consume him. That afternoon he went to her home. Not because he wanted to, but because he knew she expected it. Marisa greeted him at the gate, her smile soft, warm, harmless. David forced a casual grin. "I just want to check in. You know, people talking foolishness." She tilted her head. Her eyes studied him. Not like a lover, but like a lion studies unfamiliar prey. "I told you," she breathed. "Mount Olivet is sick. I'm trying to keep balance." Her words washed over him gently, but he felt them like knives. Balance, always balance, never mercy. He sat at her table, the same table where the tea had stolen his consciousness, the same table where shadows moved on their own. She offered him tea again. He smiled. "My belly is not so well these days. Just some water for me." She nodded once slowly. That was when he knew. She suspected nothing. Her guard was down, and that was the only advantage he would ever have. Days passed, and he still visited. They talked, they laughed, at least David pretended to. He complimented her dresses. He listened to her stories. He acted unchanged. all while watching her eyes because the eyes didn't lie. Sometimes her eyes held kindness, sometimes loneliness, but at nightfall they gleamed with hunger. David kept his distance now, and he never slept there, never drank, never stayed past midnight. But every visit he cataloged her movements, how she scraped the floor with chalk, how she prepared the calabash, how she sang to shadows, as if the house itself were alive. He carried the weight of every observation back to Elder Simeon, who prayed, warned, and wept quietly when he did not think David saw. Because Simeon understood something David had not yet accepted. You don't defeat a spirit by killing a woman. You defeat a spirit by ending its agreement. And agreements always require blood. Night once again settled over Mount Olivet. Not peaceful, not quiet, but tense like the land itself was holding its breath. David walked the dirt path toward Marisa's house, each step heavy, each heartbeat a warning. The air didn't move, yet the bamboo leaves whispered. Dogs didn't bark, but their low growls trembled in the dark. He kept repeating to himself, "Just watch, don't panic, do what Simeon told you." The pouch in his pocket was warm from his hand. Too warm. Marisa greeted him the way she always did. Soft smile, eyes calm. When he entered her home that night, she welcomed him like nothing was wrong. "I am glad you came, David. Is a quiet night." Peaceful, peaceful. The word itself felt crooked in his ears. She poured tea as she always did. The steam curled upward like a serpent, soft and warm, begging him to breathe it in. David forced a smile. "You always make this place feel safe," he lied, and she laughed. A light, musical laugh, almost gentle. But gentleness can be a weapon too, especially when it is used to disarm the heart. They sat at the small wooden table. David lifted the cup to his lips. He did not drink. He only pretended to sip, letting the liquid touch nothing but his tongue. Marisa leaned forward, studying him. "You tired, David? Your eyes look heavy." He swallowed slowly. "Long day. At school. The children." "Children?" she interrupted softly, eyes narrowing. "They will be fine. You must take care of yourself." Something in the way she said yourself felt territorial. David forced a yawn, glancing toward the door. "I should probably go soon. It's late." She didn't smile this time. She didn't tell him, stay like she usually did. She just watched him, eyes too calm. Then she stood, smooth as silk, silent as smoke. She walked to her bedroom door, her hand resting gently on the frame, as if she were greeting something on the other side. Her voice lowered. "Wait a little, I have something to show you." David nodded, slowly, pretending to relax in his chair. Marisa disappeared behind the curtain, and the moment she did, the atmosphere changed. The faint hum started first, soft like a lullaby sung to someone who should never wake up. David pretended to adjust his shirt, pretended to stand casually and stretched. Then he moved. A careful step toward the hallway, toward where she had gone, and that's when he heard it. A voice that sounded like hers but wasn't entirely human anymore. A chant, rising and falling like breath. It was not a prayer or a song. It was something older. David's heart climbed into his throat. He whispered to himself, "Just look, then leave." He pushed the curtain gently aside and saw what no man ever wants to see. Marisa did not look surprised when David entered the back room. If anything, she looked prepared. Her voice was soft, smooth as velvet. "Whatever you see happen, do not speak of it and do not fear. I would never hurt you." There was no tremor in her tone, only certainty, the kind that made David feel small, like a child about to learn a lesson best left unlearned. He should have left then. He should have run, but curiosity has its own chains. The room was already alive. Symbols twisted across the floor, loops, spirals, shapes that moved when you weren't watching them. The calabash in the center held water, if it was water. Thick herbs steeped in it, dark strands floating like broken veins. It smelled like smoke and rot, like something that remembered death. 3 candles surrounded it, flames bending inward, as though pulled by unseen breath. David felt the temperature drop. Not the chill of open air, but something heavier, intentional. The goat from the previous ritual was gone. In its place sat a rooster, shaking as though every cell in its body understood the danger better than he did. Its eyes were round, bulging, and wet with terror. Marisa stood at the far edge of the room, head lowered, arms spread wide. Her voice slid across the floor. He had heard prayer. He had heard revival songs. He had heard the tongues of saints caught in holy fire. This was none of them. This was a mouth speaking a language borrowed from dust and shadow. The rooster jerked. Once, its beak opened, but no sound emerged. A cold wind pushed through the floorboards. David's skin tightened. Every hair rose. Marissa's head snapped upright. Her eyes were wrong, not glowing, not human. They were empty, as if her body were a house and the owner had stepped outside. She inhaled deeply and something began to lift from her chest. It was the shape of a spirit separating from a body. At first, David thought it was a shadow, but the shadow does not have eyes. A translucent form, a second Marisa, rose from her physical shell, drifting upward as if gravity bowed in respect. Her body remained standing, arms raised, motionless. The spirit hovered above it, then it turned and saw him. No face, yet it saw him. David staggered back, knees shaking. He wanted to scream, but his voice was held hostage inside his throat. The spirit drifted toward the doorway. It did not walk. It glided, passing through the bamboo shutters as if the night itself had invited it. Dogs outside whimpered suddenly. A baby cried from 2 houses down. Wind clawed through the trees, though the sky was still. David pressed himself against the wall, breath ragged. The body that remained in the room, Marissa's emptied flesh, lay still, like an abandoned vessel waiting to be inhabited again. David fell to his knees, trembling, eyes locked on the form she left behind. And in that moment, he understood one thing. It was not superstition. It was real. And it was not human. David did not plan. He did not pray. He did not reason. When the spirit left her body and drifted toward the window like smoke drawn to the moon, something ancient inside him moved faster than fear. It was time to act. His trembling fingers reached into his shirt, the small pouch Elder Simeon had given him. Holy oil, salt, and pepper. He moved before fear could drag him back. David stepped into the center of the room and threw the salt across the symbols. It struck like fire, a hiss as if the chalk were alive. The candles roared upward, flames stretching like claws, clawing at the air. The spirit that hovered near the window shuddered, as though something had seized its throat. It twisted violently, body contorting in midair, snapped backwards like it had been yanked by an invisible chain. Then came the scream. A sound pulled from every nightmare a child ever feared. The sound that makes birds abandon trees and dogs hide beneath houses. The windows rattled. The boards in the floor trembled. Even the rooster collapsed, silent. Marissa's body jerked, spine bending, shoulders cracking like dry bamboo in the wind. Her fingers curled in unnatural shapes as if her bones disagreed. The calabash bowl shook uncontrollably, water churning like a living thing trapped in its own skin. Then it tipped. Dark liquid spilled across the floor, and the symbols drowned, lines curling and melting like worms under hot salt. Everything broke at once. The candles snapped sideways. The spirit slammed into her body, a violent collision like lightning hitting earth. Her back arched so sharply it looked impossible. Her mouth opened, screaming until the sound became air itself. Then, silence. A heavy, more terrifying than all the noise before it. David's breath scraped his lungs. He backed away, legs trembling, as if the floor were sinking beneath him. Marisa trembled on the ground, hair wild, skin slick with sweat. Slowly, too slowly, she lifted her head. The eyes that met his were not soft. They were not the woman who smiled by rivers and waited by gates. They burned. When she spoke, the voice was wrong. Two voices, layered like someone whispering beneath her words. You have chosen war. For a moment, David thought she was broken, that the ritual was fractured and the curse undone. But evil does not die quietly. Marissa's head snapped to the side as though something unseen tugged her spine. Her hands clawed at the boards, nails dragging grooves into wood. Her lips parted and a sound escaped, a low, rumbling growl, like something waking beneath the earth. Then she moved. Not like a woman. Something inside her lunged forward, dragging her body with it, a shadow wearing human skin. David stumbled backward. She rose to her feet without using her hands. Her neck twisted, her eyes blazed, her voice dripped venom. You do not understand what you touched. He wanted to answer. He wanted to pray. He wanted to rebuke her in Jesus' name, but fear strangled his tongue. She stepped forward, slow, deliberate, like a predator circling prey. Her fingers stretched unnaturally. You think you can break me with salt? David, I showed you mercy. The way she said his name felt like ice pressed against bone. He turned. He ran. David burst through the door. Night wind hit him like a wall. The moon hung low, swollen and red, as though the sky itself had been watching. Branches whipped his arms as he sprinted down the dirt road. His lungs burned. His heart crashed against his ribs like fists. Behind him, the door of Marissa's house slammed open. Something moved faster than footsteps, a rushing sound, like wind tearing through bamboo. David didn't dare look back. He threw himself down the hillside path, feet skidding over dust and stones. The cricket chorus fell silent. Dogs whimpered behind fences. Something was following him, not walking but gliding. The air around him grew cold, as though the night itself recoiled. A voice floated behind him, no longer feminine, no longer human. You brought this on yourself. He stumbled, crashing into the dirt, palms tearing open. The road split ahead, left toward the river, right toward the village. His spirit screamed, "Run to the light!" He turned right. He could hear her behind him. Something scraped across the ground, like claws dragging. He pushed harder. The village lights appeared, small orange dots through smoke and mist. A house at the end of the lane, a humble wooden structure with low windows. Elder Simeon's home. David didn't knock. He didn't call. He crashed into the door like a wave hitting a rock. He fell into the house, gasping, trembling, shaking like a child. Elder Simeon was already awake as if he had been waiting. The old man looked at him only once and understood. No words. He placed a firm hand on David's shoulder and whispered, "Do not look back." Then he closed the door. The wind outside shrieked, slamming itself against the wood like a living thing. The lamps flickered. The house trembled. David pressed himself against the wall. His heartbeat was roaring in his ears. Simeon reached for his Bible, like a soldier lifting a weapon. This is no woman now. It is what wears her. Outside, something scraped along the walls. A voice bled through the night. "Give him back to me." Simeon lifted his eyes to heaven. "The blood of Jesus is against you." Night pressed against Elder Simeon's house like a living thing. The wind did not blow. It scraped. It clawed. It howled like a wounded spirit circling prey. David shook violently back against the door, palms bleeding from the fall. His chest heaved, lungs wheezing as if the night itself stole his breath. Elder Simeon stood still, his voice calm, face unshaken, and his eyes fierce with something David had not seen before. Warrior faith. He lifted his Bible and spoke with the authority of an old prophet. There is a spirit outside, not a woman, not flesh, but a covenant of darkness. Something dragged across the walls, a long, slow scrape, like nails on zinc sheeting. David's eyes widened. He whispered, barely able to form sound. "She followed me." Simeon nodded. "Evil always follows those who escape its mouth." Then the pounding began. Outside, a voice crawled through the cracks. "Give him back to me." Simeon lifted his head and answered without fear, "You have no claim in this house." David could barely whisper, She's stronger than last time. Simeon did not look away. Witchcraft grows when no one resists it. He placed a hand on David's shoulder. You have started to break her ritual. Now she will try to break you, unless God stands between you. Outside, the figure pressed harder. A sickening chorus rose from the wind, half shriek, half roar. Simeon slammed his Bible shut and began to pray. He prayed like a man who had buried friends, who had seen families torn apart, who had watched darkness devour a village once before. Father, in the name of Jesus, cut every spirit, every curse, every covenant. The air changed. The shaking stopped for one horrifying second. Then the windows shattered from pressure, from a scream that did not come from lungs but from beyond flesh. David screamed. Simeon did not. He stepped forward, his voice booming through the room. The Lord rebuke you. Silence, then a laugh, a soft, female, mocking. You do not know what she is. David covered his ears. Tears cut down his cheeks. Simeon spoke again. I do not need to know her. I know the one above her. The shadow outside shrank, pulled back as if hit by unseen fire. The night fell still. No scraping, no wind. It was as if the spirit stepped away, only to prepare something worse. Simeon turned to David, voice low and sober. You cannot outrun her. David swallowed, trembling. Then what do I do? The old man looked him in the eyes like a soldier called to war. You end her, David, before she ends this village. This is the end of part 3, but the war for Mount Olivet has only just begun. And so, Mount Olivet entered a darker night than any before it, a village under spiritual siege, a teacher caught between fear and destiny, and a woman whose beauty hid a hunger older than the hills. David escaped the house that night with nothing but trembling breath and a pounding heart. But escape did not mean freedom, because Marisa's words haunted him. You have chosen war. When spiritual warfare reaches its peak, what happens to a man who is already running on fear? And most importantly, when Marisa strikes back, who will survive the night? If this part of the story has stirred your heart, please support the channel. Like, share, and subscribe for more modern Jamaican parables that uplift and inspire. Don't forget to leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's keep the fire of faith, hope, and kindness burning strong across the world. Together we can tell stories that change lives and build a better world. Blessings from Jamaica.